ones would we like to see do more for those?
3 on the back. 2 and 4 and 3. Let me grab this. Okay, so between 3 and 4, because those are kind of the same thing. Everyone choose between 3 and 4, and we'll do one of those, and then we will do 2. There's more 3s than 4, so we'll do 3, and then we'll do 2 and 3. But my numbers are weird, so I'm going to find those ones. This is 4. That's 2, and then that's 3. Okay, in number 2, it tells you that the following contains line L, that's this line, and point M, which is labeled. Line L contains these 2 points. Point M is located here. Part A is asking to state the perpendicular slope of the line. So I could count, but the graph is a little off. So I'm just going to use my slope formula for that one. By doing 1 minus 5 over 5 minus a negative 5 to get negative 4 over 10 or negative 2/5. So that's the slope of this line. The perpendicular slope would be me taking that, flipping it, and making it positive. So that would be 5 over 2. So part A was pretty straightforward. Part B, you have to plot another point that would be parallel to line L, but that would go through point M. So the easiest way to do this is to start at point M, and because it's parallel, it's going to have the same slope, negative 2/5, and just plot another point. But you have to be careful because this graph is cutting by 2s and not 1. So when it's in the middle like this is really negative 2, 1, 2, 3, negative 2, negative 3. I'm sorry, negative 4, negative 3. So when it's in the middle, those are your odd numbers. When it's on a line, those are your even numbers. So counting by negative 2, you just need one of these points. I'm just going to show you all the points you could possibly have. So this will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'll list them all also so you have them. So negative 9, negative 1. Negative 14, positive 1, and then I couldn't keep going, I'd be off the graph. 1, 2, let's see. So that would be, let's see, 1, 2, 4, negative 5. 6, negative 7. So any of these 5 points you could have had, but you just had to remember this is counting by 2s. So they're going to be like kind of in the middle. But I can see that this line is going to be parallel to this line. So pick one of those points and plot one of those points. Questions there? Evan. Alright, and then moving on to number 3. So we have to decide which of these sets is parallel, perpendicular, or neither. So this one that's already solved for us. These are not parallel, they're not the same. These are reciprocals, but one is not negative, so these are neither. You can write the equation or just write the letter. The other two we have to solve. So for this one, if I were to subtract 2x, you get y equals negative 2x plus 5. And when I look at those two slopes, they are reciprocals and one is negative, so that's my perpendicular case, which means but also solve that so you see y. So I'm going to do this simultaneously. Subtract 3x and 12x. So we have 5y equals negative 3x plus 9, and 20y equals negative 12x plus 18. And then you'll have to divide by 5 for the first one, by 20 for the second one, and simplify. So our two equations would be y equals negative 3/5 x plus 9/5, and y equals 4. Oh, that was negative 3/5 x plus 9/5. What you could have also done is use Desmos, put the two equations in, and saw, do they cross and are their slopes negative reciprocals? Do they not cross? And are their slopes the same? Questions on that one? Before we get into our lesson for today, were there any Delta Math questions from writing linear equations part 1 or part 2 that we were having difficulty with, wanting to see up here before we move on? If you did not do those, make sure you go back and do those. Those are the first grades of marking period 2. So if you did not do those, you are already, your grade is already low for marking period 2. Okay, so remember that, keep that in mind. Okay, before we do that. So what we're talking about today is function notation. We're going to talk about what that means here in a second, but it's a lot of evaluating. Who has heard that word before? Yes. Kind of. What does that mean, to evaluate something? Kind of. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? Okay, well, we'll talk about that. So when we evaluate, we're going to put in some number to figure out what it equals. You could write that down if you so choose. But when we do this with function notation, it looks different. So instead of having a y equals some equation, we're going to have f of x equals that same equation. So we'll have a function instead of an equation. They're really the same thing. Y and f of x are really the same thing, except y is used more for equations, f of x is used more for functions. Functions, we put something in, we get something out. So when you read this, it's f of x. But you might also see g of x, h of x, j of x. That part doesn't matter. It's the same thing. They're just changing that letter. So when we evaluate in function notation, we're going to substitute the value in for x. So to do this, we have an equation. We're going to do each of these for this equation, for this function. F of 5 means I'm putting 5 in for all of my x values. So that would look something like this. F of 5, because there was an x there, equals 5 plus 7. And then I figure out what 5 plus 7 is, which is 12. So then I would write my answer as one of two things. You could either say f of 5 equals 12. That would mean when x is 5, y is 12. Or you can write it as f of x equals 12. Since f of x is y, I'm saying my y value is 12. So either or, you can write it as either or. Questions so far? Then we're just going to keep doing the same thing. We're still using that same equation. So for part B, that would be f of negative 1 equals negative 1 plus 7. What would f of negative 1 equal? Or f of x equal? Who's there already? 6. And that would be that answer. Let's do the last one. F of negative 3 is negative 3 plus 7. So f of negative 3 or f of x equals 4. So this is really just about replacing the x value, putting it in, figuring out what y is for now. Questions so far? Okay, we're going to do so in 3, we're going to do the same thing. I'm not going to rewrite this part because it's already there. I'm just going to put equals. But then I'm going to put the negative 3 in for x. So 2/3 times negative 3 minus 1. Now, as we're doing this, anytime you can simplify, do that step first before you keep going. So 2/3 times negative 3 would give us negative 2, because the 3's cancel, just leaving the negative and the 2. So then h of negative 3 equals negative 3, because negative 2 minus 1 is negative 3. Do you have any questions, confusions that we want to clear up now before it gets complicated? This negative 2. So when we multiply these two together, that's what that would equal. So you could check that in your calculator or do that part by hand. Okay, moving on to the next one. H of 0. Yes. Yes. Two-thirds times 0 would give us 0. So h of 0 is what? Negative 1. And then for the last one, h of 9 equals 2/3 times 9. What is that first part? 2/3 times 9. Multiplying the top 2 is 18, but then we gotta divide by 3. 6. So h of 9 equals 6 minus 1, which is 5. Any questions about that? We're going to move on and do number 4, and then I'm going to show you how you could do one of these in the calculator / in Desmos. Not that you'll have Desmos on the tests, on the quiz, but in practice you could be doing this. So this one has 2 x's, so I'm just going to do this twice now. So f of negative 4, use parentheses, is negative 4 outside of the parentheses squared minus a negative 4. So in your calculator, if you're squaring something, you can use this button, but make sure you put this in parentheses and then that outside of the parentheses. So if you're losing question. Okay. So negative 4 squared would be what? Positive 16. This will become plus 4. So f of negative 4 is, which is 20. Okay, f of negative 1, let's do the same thing. negative 1 squared is say it again. Should be positive 1. So f of negative 1 is and then last one, f of 7, we don't really need the parentheses for the first one, but I'm going to put it regardless. So 7 squared minus 7. 7 squared is 49. So f of 7 is really quickly, just in case you were wondering about the positives and negatives, if you put it in with parentheses, it'll give you a positive number. But if you don't, it'll give you a negative number. But this is saying negative 1 times 4 squared, which is why you get a negative. So don't do this. Make sure you're using parentheses. Okay, in your calculator, we're going to put number 6 in. So you're going to go into y equals at the top. And you're going to type in negative x squared, so your negative, your x, and then the square button, plus 6x minus 4. So in your y equals, you're typing that equation. And then you're going to go into the table. So the table is in blue above graph, so second graph. And then this is a quick way to check yourself. Even on the quiz, on the test, double check yourself in this by putting that into y equals. And then for any number I'm looking for, so f of negative 3, I'm looking for what is my y value when x is negative 3. I can quickly see that. Or f of negative 1, I can quickly see that. Or f of 5, I can go down and see what that value is. Questions about that? Yeah. Second graph. Okay. Desmos basically works the same way. Is that plus 6x or minus? Plus 4. So you can put it in as the f of x, you can put it in as y equals, you can not put that first part at all, it doesn't matter. And then make that into a table. It'll show you a certain number, certain amount of numbers, but you can keep putting in whatever numbers you want. So if I need negative 3 and that's not there, I can put that in and it'll do that for me. Same thing for anything else. You could keep going as much as you want. Okay. On that first page, were there any others we wanted to see do go over before we move on? Okay, we're going to skip through 7 through 10 and look at 11 on the back. Which one was it? You would square it first. Okay, in 11, and for Anthropologists use the length of certain bones of a human skeleton to estimate the height of the living person. One of these bones is the femur. To estimate the height in centimeters of a female with a femur length of x, the function h of x equals 61.41 plus 2.32x can be used. So using that, we're going to find h of 46. So we're going to put 46 in for x just like we did previously. Tell me what that number is. Okay, 168.13. I'm going to leave that without units or anything first because part B is going to talk about that. What does this mean? So let's talk about the 168.13. What does that mean in the context of the problem?
It means that female with a length of 46, with a femur length of 46, would be 168.13 centimeters.
Yes. So you answer both parts. The 46 is the femur length. And I don't know if that's what that is measured in. And then the 168.13 is the female's height. So being able to use the equation or put the number in, find that y value, and then determine what that means is also part of what you'll need to be able to do. I think you'll see more of those in the Delta Math. I couldn't find many practice problems myself. Okay. Something else you'll need to do with function notation is be able to find it from a graph. So this is just like if you would do it with an equation, but you're looking at the graph. So when I say f of -4, I'm looking at when my x value is -4, what is my y value? So I'm going to outline the x and y axes. When my x value is at -4, what is my y value? Where does that line cross? Somewhere here, along here, when my x is -4, what's my y value on this line, on this function? +2. So I would write that as equals 2, or I can say f of x equals 2. So then what would f of 0 be? 0. It's going to cross it at 0. F of 2, -2. And f of 5, -1. Do you have questions on how we found any of those from a graph? We're going to move on to the next page. in this is basically doing the same thing we were doing at the beginning, but now we have multiple numbers in one set problem. It's not like part A, part B, part C. So we're doing the same thing. We're going to put 4 in and 6 in and 8 in, but then our answer is going to be all of those, and we'll list them. So starting this off, we'll have f of 4 and figure out what that is, which would be -1. And then the next one, f of 6, and figure out what that would be. One. And then the last one, f of 8. So then I would write my final answers. Because my domain was given to me like this, I want my range, my y values, to be written the same way. So my range is going to be in set notation, curly brackets, least to greatest. So -1, 1, 3. Any questions about that? Are there any of these that we would like to see do go over before we move on to the next page? Yes, that's what we're about to do next. Alright, so far, all the ones we've done so far have been asking for the y value given the x value. But as we're looking at this, now I have some f of x equals, which means now we're given which value? Y, and we need to find x. So it's basically going to be opposite of what we were just doing. So still using that first equation, but because I'm given my y value, that has to go where y would be, the whole thing. So I would just take f of x and replace it with -5. And set that equal to x plus 7 so that I could solve for x. How would I do that? Subtract 7. So that x equals what value? Say again. -12. Now you can write it as x equals -12 or f of -12. Either or. The solving method will be the same for each of these. I'm just going to replace it with a different number each time. So in each one, I'm still going to subtract 7. So when y is 0, what would that x value be? -7. And then when y is 10, what would that x value be? 3. Questions like 4 you probably wouldn't see because we'd have to take the square root, which is not something we've talked about doing with solving like this. So questions like this you wouldn't see, but if you practice it, let's see. Are there any others on this page we want to see do go over before we move on? Robert, are you saying 5? Okay, so in this, if we are solving for for x, we're going to put that number in just like we did before. So 7 equals negative 1/2 x plus 9. And if I'm solving for x, what would be my first step? Subtract 9. So we have negative 2 equals negative 1/2 x. And then to get the x by itself, multiply both sides by 2. Negative 2, the reciprocal. So that x equals positive 4 because there's 2 negatives. Now that we know how to solve it, we're going to do the same methods but with the other 2 y values. So set this equal to 14. And we're just going to do the same process. Subtract 9. And multiply both sides by negative 2. When y is 14, what is your x value? Negative 10, yes. Okay. And then do the same thing for 18. Subtract 9 on both sides. And multiply both sides by negative 2. When x is 18, when y is negative, when y is 18, there we go, what is x? Okay, go on to the next page. So we're going to do the same thing with the graph that we did before, but now we're given y values and have to find the x value. So when f of x equals negative 2, what is your x value? Say that one more time. I just didn't hear whatever number was said. What did you say? It was probably right. What number did you say? Okay. So when y is negative 2, your x value is at 2. When f of x equals 0, what is your x value? Zero. When f of x equals 2, now there are 2 answers for this one. Give me one of them. I heard negative, what was that number?
2.
Okay, so I heard negative 1 and negative 2. At 2, so on this line. There's a point right here, which is not quite at negative 1, so we got to make up a decimal for that. But then 2, 3, not negative 3, but negative 4. What decimal could we make up for that one? What? Yes, negative 0.8, but yes. Okay, and then when y is 4, what is your x value? So the most important thing about this is knowing what are you solving for and do you solve for the right thing. Do you have any questions about the graph before we do some of these examples, and then you have time to practice? Yeah. So when y is 2, this line, this function goes through this line twice. Yes. If you had 2 answers, you would put both. It depends on the function. Right, and then in the bottom part, very similar to what we previously just did, and then I'll show you how to do the y's. You can't do the y's in the calculator, but you can do it. I'll show you both. Now we are given the range and have to find the domain. So you're going to set them up just how we were just doing this. Put this in for f of x, replace the whole f of x with that number. And solve for x by doing what in this case? Adding 5. So this one, x would equal 2. Then do the same thing with 0. And add 5. So that x would equal positive 5. And then do the last thing, do the same thing with the last one. So that x equals 10. And then just like before, we were given our, before it was domain, but now we're given our range in set notation, so we want to give our domain in set notation as well. So least to greatest, that would be 2, 5, 10. Questions about that? Other questions on this page we want to see you go over? Okay. In the calculator, I missed it. You can't do the y values in Desmos necessarily. If you look for a specific y value in your function, then you can look at what the x value is. You just have to be aware of what those y values are. In Desmos, I can't put y values in this. It won't let me. But I could make it a guessing game. So let's do this function. Let's say I want to know when y is, I think we said 51 was one of the answers. And I know that if I keep going up, I'll get there. It becomes a guessing game. So I could say maybe I could put 5. That was spot on. If 5 didn't work, then I would just choose another number and keep doing that until the number I got worked. This is actually negative 5, but so that means it would have to be negative 5. Oh, that didn't work either. It's all the same thing. Okay, but you kind of see what I'm talking about. Put in different numbers and play around with that, and you kind of have to guess. Right now, if you have not done the parallel and perpendicular lines delta math that is due on Friday, you can be working on that. The function notation delta math on what we just did is also due on Friday, so you can be working on that. If you need to finish your tests, you can do that. If you want to do retake work, finish one of the delta maths first. And let me know if